Yeah. Well, I'm lucky enough to know Waldo as well, but through you, I haven't known him for as long and not doing quite such extreme expeditions. We've done a couple of bits, but the main thing is I just love being around the bloke. Like, these days it's quite rare to meet someone who genuinely has no veneer, no facade, no front at all. We're all guilty of it because you're trying to fit in with your groups or whatever it might be. And you just meet Waldo and he's unapologetically Waldo. Like, always in a good mood, always having fun, can go very deep. And the things you're passionate about, I've never met anyone who's so passionate about the things you're passionate about, which is pretty cool, which is also trees.
Yeah.
It is indeed.
How did this start?
Well, you brought up that topic. You popped the lid.
Yeah.
Remember that. Yeah, well, from my part, it's an absolute honour to be in the same booth as you guys. Likewise, you're both remarkable people who I've really enjoyed getting to know and sharing space with. And the conversations have been life-changing, essentially, like seeing how you guys operate, your perspectives on the world, how you've shaped your existence and how you've decided to delineate your paths and essentially like create your own example of who you want to be and how you want to do things. And I think you're both inspirational. And it's been
Stop it.
a pleasure to share.
This is about
share
you.
trips with you.
Special.
No, but it has. Yeah, very poignant expeditions I've done with both of you. Yeah.
Well, let's go back in time then, as Ed's alluding to. Like, I think your childhood is fascinating, you know, and feel free to go into detail on it. Like, where did you grow up, under what circumstances, and what was life like?
Yeah, so that's starting at the beginning, isn't it? I was brought up by my mum and my sister, essentially. And from the early years, my mum, it's a very long story, but she had no money. And essentially we were pretty much homeless until all her friends banded together and decided to buy her a house, which is the house she has now. So until I was 3, we were pretty aloof, living in various places. And then right up into my teenage years, you know, I had free school meals. I think my mum was living off 36 pence a week at one point. We had concrete floors, piles of bricks with scaffold boards across as our chairs. We slept on like a mattress and sleeping bags in the attic. Like we weren't rich. But from rich heritage, my grandmother had a trust fund that was ultimately used up by the people that were put in place to look after it. So she ended up with no money, but was from this very, very wealthy background. And sort of, I guess that culture is a privilege in some respects because it allows me to walk the walk. I mean, talk the talk, not the walk the walk. I mean, maybe a bit of both, who knows.
What, because of your name?
Because of my name, because of the being brought up with that kind of upper class atmosphere, you know, manners cost nothing and, you know, pronounce your words properly and speak properly. It's very sort of upper class, white. It puts you in a different echelon somehow. Like it's unfair, but it allows you to navigate circles that if you're from a working class background and you don't have that input, it's more difficult to enter into those spaces. So I think although we had no money, I was brought up with absolutely nothing. I never had like, you know, proper school uniforms. I was using my sister's shoes and everything was too big for me. It was always hand-me-downs. I never had a lunchbox. Like I had this like really sort of poor childhood, but I had this like access to a very sort of upper class input coming down from my grandmother, which is a massive privilege. And yeah, so kind of strange, you know, I'm called Waldo Etherington, for God's sake. I sound like I own about 5 estates.
Could you got the middle name in as well, please?
So yeah, my full name, Waldo James Bayard Etherington. My sister's Eleanor Erblich Etherington. You know, quite well spoken if I'm not drunk and in Dorset. So it's kind of a funny, in my opinion, a very funny kind of amalgamation of worlds, you know. A lot of people assume I'm from this incredibly privileged background with lots of money and born with a silver spoon in my mouth. And the reason that I've been able to have access to all these incredible adventures is because, you know, mummy and daddy paid for it. But in reality, I didn't have that financial support. But I did have the privilege of being brought up by with my grandmother's input.
That's really interesting because we've spoken quite a lot about the impact of our tribe or
Yeah.
where you're born. Like we spoke to Adam Raj a lot about the postcode lottery and the fact that he probably didn't have a choice and ending up doing what he was doing. But you've got almost two conflicting worlds influencing your childhood. You've got an upper class upbringing in terms of like mannerisms, effectively, and the way you conduct yourself. But then you've got no money. So how do you think those two things, like what from those two elements have shaped you most profoundly?
I think one of the best lessons that I was ever taught, and it was a lesson that went on for a while, is to be able to navigate the world with no money, you know, to appreciate things. I remember at a kid's birthday party once being given a carton of orange juice, and apparently I was just stunned holding it, and I said, "What, all for me?" Everyone was like, "Yeah, the whole carton of orange juice is for you." And I really appreciated things that if I'd had lots of money, that would have been nothing, you know. I was like, I think that's been probably one of the most influential parts of my upbringing and my kind of education, was just being able to operate with no money, understanding that you don't need a lot of money to have fun, to go out in nature, to have adventure, and to get by in the world. But also, I think having the emphasis of sort of the import of education, of manners, of composing yourself well, and sort of, I guess, cherishing knowledge, that kind of sort of, what's the word? I don't know. Yeah, just the importance of knowledge.
You've always been very interested in things, haven't you? Like, I'll say something, you're like, what do you mean by that?
Yeah.
You know, we can get quickly down the rabbit hole. And you think do you think that's part of that's a cultural thing from that side, where knowledge is revered within those classes, I suppose, in a weird way. So you're like trying to...
Yeah, I guess so. I guess that was kind of like just in the background that knowledge is revered. But also my grandmother's brother, John Horlick Mercer, was known as the grandfather of the greenhouse effect. So he was quite a reputed scientist that did he basically measured glaciers. He was a glacial geomorphologist. So back in the day with a team of huskies going deep into the Arctic and the Antarctic regions, measuring glaciers. And he essentially discovered what global warming was, discovered what the greenhouse effect was, and then had all his funding pulled. So from day dot in my life, climate change and global warming has been this kind of, essentially it's in the family. It's like family knowledge, and also that image of somebody that's in your family being an explorer has been a massive influence for me. I cannot remember a day when I didn't want to be an explorer. Like from as early as I can remember, I've wanted to aid science and go to remote places and explore. And I think that's largely because of his input.
But how much of that as well is, you know, if you're growing up in, I mean, the language I would use is impoverished. When you describe the house and the way things were, it's an impoverished background. I'm assuming the house wasn't full of, you know, plastic fire engines and all the toys in the world and PlayStations. What did you do with your time as a child? And how did that impact thirst for knowledge and the person you became?
Yeah, I think impoverished is the word with regard to material things, but also unconditional love. Like that permeated my entire existence. My mum is an incredible woman. My sister's an incredible woman. And they were always very candid with me about the situation, about how, you know, they couldn't manage certain things, how my mum was essentially unfit to look after me at times, or just didn't have the capacity to keep an eye on me in the same way young children usually do have from their parents. But I did have unconditional love, and I had this sort of unconditional, like, enthusiasm. My mum was always prepared to be amazed by what I was doing. And naturally, I was drawn to trees and climbing trees and nature. My grandmother used to take me out looking for badgers or looking at buzzards and just looking for birds' nests. And so I was sort of really captured by this sense of how special and secretive the natural world is. And I just had a real love of being in it and amongst it. And from really early on, I was climbing trees more than your average kid. Like I was making my own harnesses out of rope. I was tensioning high lines between trees at like the age of 5, 6 years old. And for every birthday or Christmas or Easter, any celebration, my present was always a big black bin liner filled with ropes and cargo nets. The town I was brought up in, Bridport, is a rope and net making town. So historically, they've made sort of a large percentage of the world's ropes and nets. So it was very easy to go to like a skip and pull out old ropes and old nets and give that to me. And that was the best present in the world. So from really early on, I've wanted to explore. I've wanted to be in nature. I've wanted to climb trees. And I've had access to a huge, like an abundance of ropes and nets and trees.
It's amazing that your mum facilitated that. I know a lot of mothers or fathers out there. I know my mum was constantly going, get down from that tree, you know, and I'm with my brother, like, because it's dangerous, you know.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how much she supported she saw you were passionate at it, or enjoying it so much that she supported that, even though it was potentially dangerous. I mean, who taught you to make harnesses?
I mean, I taught myself that. Yeah. And I learned the hard way for sure in terms of like learning how to work with rope. But I think, that support from my mum, that kind of enthusiasm and encouragement is a really special thing. And I think that, especially when it comes to like overt risk, you know, climbing up somewhere high, potentially falling down, letting kids play. And I think almost the most important and significant part of child development is unsupervised play, which I had an abundance of, and a lot of people don't have an abundance of. Like being able to make decisions for yourself. When an adult isn't there, you're forced to think about things and make your own decision. When an adult is there, you've got this kind of natural filter, this natural kind of catch there.
Yeah, I mean, humour me, let me go here, because I've got a 1 and a 3-year-old, but it like that's a big thing for us at the moment. And I think there's this, our generation now, as somebody who's spending a lot of time with new parents, I think we're getting a lot right, and we're trying to break chains on generational trauma and the way we teach kids and interact with kids and behave around our children, apologising to a 3-year-old when you shout at them because you have lost control. That's a thing that we're all doing that we like, but I'm seeing a lot of really controlled play, and everything has to be structured and formulaic. Today we are doing this, then this, then this. It's almost like school.
Yeah.
And also the risk tolerance, I would say, is at an all-time low.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
God, that's a good question. I think because there's an abundance of knowledge out there in the form of books, podcasts, Instagram, etc., that says these are all the things you can do with your kids now. And so my wife and I talk about it all the time, and she wouldn't mind me saying, you know, I call her out and I'm a bit critical of like, we could just not do a thing today. We could just play. We could just go to the woods. We could just put the art stuff on the table and see what happens. And I think it's the internet, and I think that it's a problem.
Yeah.
The kids, they just don't know how to be bored. And that's one of the things I've read a lot about is if you don't let kids be bored, they won't learn how to solve boredom, and then they get the dopamine addiction and all this stuff that's coming down the track.
Yeah.
When you look at teenagers now, you've got the same problem.
Yeah.
You know, I don't imagine you get bored often. One of the things I like about you.
Well, also, you didn't have PlayStations, Instagram.
Yeah,
you wouldn't have had them anyway because you wouldn't have been able to afford it, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like you have to make your own fun.
Yeah.
I live in Dorset, great, there's a tree over there.
Yeah.
I'm going to go and play in it.
Yeah.
And you haven't stopped
Yeah.
playing in trees. Which is great, but it's so much harder for kids these days, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Well, that makes me think actually about your sense of like childhood friends and community. And because again, that's something else I could ramble on about, but won't, about kids' access to friends outdoors and what they've lost. And, you know, right, be back in time for dinner.
Yeah.
That is not a thing anymore.
Yeah.
What was your kind of childhood friendship group like, and what did you get up to?
Again, I'd consider it as incredibly privileged. You know, being in Dorset, a lot of my oldest friends that I'm really close to this day, that I've known since I was like 1-2 year old. A lot of them lived on farms. So I remember Harry's house, his mum had a big giant bell, and we'd just run around in the fields, like making fires in hedgerows, making spears with our penknives and getting totally lost in nature. And then we'd just hear this distant dinging, and it'd be his mum ringing a bell, like in front of their house. And we'd all just scurry back through the fields and go back and eat food and then charge out again. So I think, yeah, that's incredible, you know, to be brought up with access to fields and hedgerows and be able to play in them is pretty special. And yeah, that was, although we lived in sort of in the town and didn't have a lot of material possessions, a lot of my mum's close friends lived on farms or in the countryside, and I could go and play with them.
So Bridport's not the biggest town in the world. You can walk to the outskirts pretty quickly.
You can walk to the outskirts pretty quickly. Yeah.
I'm interested here because we've all got into adventure. We all really enjoy adventure. Was your childhood similar? Did you have a taste of that when you were younger?
You know what? I can feel like this bubbling emotional thing going on because I might get sad, but I need to learn to like start accepting that. But like, I have a really complicated relationship with my dad, who's now dead. And as you were speaking about it, one of the things my dad nailed when he was around was this risk tolerance thing. So, I mean, he used to get shouted at by beach lifeguards in Cornwall because he'd just send my brother and I off the top of cliffs when the tide wasn't high enough. He used to build ramps for our bikes on the street outside that were far too high. And the game was whoever goes the least distance off the ramp gets thrown in the hedge. And like that, and we used to go out to the beach before school and go in the sea. And that was Dad just saying like, bugger off, go and be boys. You know, get off the fucking PlayStation, go outside and be boys. And so that, I'm sure, is the root cause of that for me.
That's just sparked it because I grew up, I was fortunate, but grew up out in the countryside. But we couldn't get on our bikes and meet our friends in the park. We didn't have like hanging outside the post office. Like it was me and my brother. And lots of fields and woods around us. And we used to go and entertain ourselves. We used to make booby traps and get injured and do all of those things. But I wonder if that was where it sparked that we're basically just reigniting that childhood, you know. And then that just shows how important it is to do that for kids at the moment, because it's like, how do they refine something they never had in the first place in later life?
That sense of identity, right?
My dad was a doctor, right? You'd have thought, okay, he'd be a bit more concerned about us injuring ourselves. Doctors, if anyone's listening and they've got a parent who's a doctor, you'll realise you get zero sympathy for anything. I once spent 2 weeks with a broken arm because he was just like, oh, you're fine. I was 8 years old, and this is where my skill set compared to yours is very different. I went to abseil off this canal water, a dried up canal, and I forgot to tie it on at the top, so I just leant back and fell straight off. Landed on my arm. And I spent 2 weeks. Eventually the teachers got in touch and like, I think Ed's in serious pain here.
Jeez,
but I think that definitely has, I'm reigniting something maybe, that was a spark that was sort of lit in an early age.
Yeah.
But why is it that, I don't know that I have a strong view on this, but I want to get into the fact that you grew up with your mum and your sister in a sec, and the kind of the absence of men. But why is it that as a society to this day, we still lean into this idea that like dads are the reckless ones? So it's a real cliche that like the mum is the one saying, oi, get down from there, or be careful, or shouting at the dad. And the dads are the ones who are pushing the kids to take most risks. Like, is that primal? Is that nature? Or is that, I don't know.
Yeah. It's interesting that, isn't it? I mean, the kind of what we expect from different sexes and our sort of societal view on sex, on what's male and what's female. Like, I don't think many people are aware that I think in America, is it like 2% of people are born, what's the word? Like, not demisexual, but born not...
Like XXY, like where they've got both the chromosomes.
Yeah.
So like hermaphrodite.
Hermaphrodite, yeah.
Yeah, kind of, not necessarily hermaphrodite, but I think 2% of people in America are born with multiple chromosomes, and it's not necessarily clear if they're man or woman, or there's like a mix, you know. Like you say, it's a sliding scale, and it really is. Like a huge percentage of people in the world are on this scale, and not necessarily male or female as clearly as we might like to think they are.
And you also get people, obviously, who are born with XY chromosome, or, you know, genetically male or female, but aren't psychologically.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
So there is more of a blend there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But for sure, there's also like a generalist kind of view, and it rings true in a lot of society as well, that men are generally more like bolder, like maybe happy to go in like head first into stuff that women generally are a bit more considerate and cautious about. So in some respects, these sort of what's the word, stereotypes do ring true.
Yeah, but I think that plays into as well, like I'd love to get somebody in who's got a scientific, you know,
we will do
view
that
on this, but like my wife is significantly more safety concerned with the kids than I am. But as a child, my wife was incredibly brave, bold, adventurous. Like, she was an incredibly talented horse rider, broke numerous bones riding horses. She's a great skier, etc., etc. So gender stereotypes didn't get in the way of her being really outdoorsy and bold.
Yeah.
But her maternal instinct, which is hormonal and primal and ancient, has said, protect these things with everything you've got.
Yeah.
And I actually have read quite a lot about this, and I'd love to get someone on to do this one day. Historically, or again, genetically, primally, my job is to give the kids a horizon to run to, and her job is to make sure they don't die. Now, we want to challenge that. It's 2024, right? We don't have to live by that anymore. But there is some truth to it in our bones that we have to fight against.
Yeah.
But I think those things are also really important.
Yeah, to
running
acknowledge.
towards a horizon and not dying. But it doesn't necessarily have to be the dad who's pushing the horizon and the mum who's saying don't die.
Exactly.
I just think there has to be that blend there. And if you're inherently, just because you're a bloke and you're inherently more risk averse, that's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
And if you're a woman and you're less risk averse and you are pushing your kids towards the horizon, you're not careless. Like, it's not black and white.
Yeah, I think with children and bringing up children, I think maybe it's twofold. I think on one respect, it's good to trust kids and to trust in their fear. You know, often when I take kids out climbing or doing adventure, I notice that I'm very trusting in the fact that they will be fearful of falling off the edge of a cliff, and they will be careful when they need to be careful. And I think being able to trust that while not taking your eyes totally off the ball is quite an important skill. And also, I think with regards to bringing children up, you know, the constant input from my mum of like, you know, we did have a black and white television, and I remember her being like, you know, don't sit on the television, don't look at that, like go outside, like you're not allowed a games console, you've got to eat good food, like this kind of like constant battle of parents to try and like instill the correct morals and like interest in their children it's a worthwhile battle. Stick at it if you're a parent, because it does sink in. And I think if you've got a parent that's always done that, by the time you get older and you do start sort of making up your own decisions about what you want to do and how you want to be, these things are instilled in you.
Yeah, and you know, to come back to the original place where we're going with this, you know, you grew up in a house raised by your mum and your sister. In what way, for better or worse, good or bad, do you think that growing up, and maybe tell us about your dad if you're happy to, with the absence of a father figure, how that affected you?
I think for the most part, I was kind of just blissfully unaware, because I had a huge amount of freedom and a huge amount of unconditional love. And I also only had one parent to kind of argue with and get my way with things. So like my mum had her work cut out, and I often got the better of her. I think there were a few times growing up when I didn't know how to shave, or, you know, little things where you're like, oh, and I remember occasionally you'd see someone and never learned, yeah. And just that thought of like, oh, my father's out there somewhere and not knowing like who he is, or so those things definitely kind of affected me as a kid. But I think in terms of masculinity, you know, what it is to be male, not having that role model, I think ostensibly masculinity is about, you know, leadership, aggression, like assertiveness, courage, like bravery, all these things that we associate with being male. And I think actually for me, masculinity is sort of more defined by having the depth and breadth and having like a space within your character to hold emotional vulnerability. And I think for me, that's maybe a part of masculinity that's been sort of like taught to me by my mum and my sister. Yeah. And I think having the absence of a father, like I remember from very, very early on being very aware of the concept that I didn't have a role model that was my role model to follow. And I saw that as a positive, because it enabled me to cherry pick the people that I really looked up to and admired, and have multiple role models. I remember really early on being aware of that, and even telling my mum about it, saying how lucky I am not to have a father, because I can look at this person and that person and really cherry pick. And I think that's something that's permeated my entire life. And I think now even I have a lot of friends and a lot of people that I choose to hang out with that I really admire aspects of their character, and I try to absorb it.
I think that's a really I couldn't agree with you more. Like I think always got asked a lot, especially when I was playing rugby in interviews, you know, who's your hero, who do you look up to the most? And people spring to mind when you're a kid who you used to watch and stuff, but actually as it evolves, you don't know the full extent of someone's character. And I think cherry picking certain elements of different people and being inspired by certain elements of what they do, but not feeling like you have to be that person completely, is the best way to go about things. I've taken inspiration from so many different people, but for different facets of their life, you know, and I really do think that's the best way, because also the thing is, it's like, it's not, you can't just go, I want to be like that person, but not take on all of the, not bad things, but everyone's got shit, right? We've all got downsides to our character as well. And I wouldn't wish some elements of my character on some of the people that go, oh yeah, Ed, I really look up to you. It's like, okay, look up to the bits you look up to, but you don't want to necessarily be all of me, because some of it's not as admirable as you might think.
No, and you've just made me think, actually, with, you know, what you're saying. I've never thought about this before, but I won't do the full daddy issues story because we'll be here a while. But, you know, there was a lot of kind of anger, shouting, that kind of thing when I was growing up. And I'm actually going through this. I'm having therapy for it at the moment. I'm going there straight after this conversation. But when I left home at 16, I haven't realised until this conversation right now that the men I latched onto and started to kind of not idolise but take a lot of inspiration from were outdoorsmen who were doing amazing things, which was just rock climbing in the Lake District or teaching me to canoe. But they were really gentle, quite quiet, introverted, gentle men. I never heard them raise their voice. And maybe I was like subconsciously looking for a bit of calm and quiet and safety and sanctuary in these men who I also saw as brave and outdoorsy and these masculine traits I admired.
Yeah.
That's interesting as well with your upbringing, as well, not having that direct male role model from a young age. You weren't, it appears to me, you weren't trying, the elements of your character that would generally be seen as masculine, the things you do now, the adventures you go on, the risks you take, how brave you are, all of those things that are classic, you know, male traits, were evolved naturally within you.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you had this gentle, compassionate element that you were given by your mum and your sister that carried through the whole time. You weren't trying to be a man in inverted commas, because you didn't really have an example of what that should be from a really young age.
Yeah. And also I think as a man, it's kind of, I guess, the male role model is a more prevalent role model in some respects. Like it's a stronger role model that's sort of naturally all around you and quite dominant. And I think with women, you know, being brought up, being expected to be weaker and not as good as this at this as men, and to be beautiful and to be like delicate, and although we're, you know, thank God things are changing and we are in 2024 and that view is being consciously kind of changed and challenged, I think it's still incredibly prevalent. And I think that's easy to lose sight of. So I think being a man without a father, I wonder what it'd be like to be a woman without a mother, and how those parallels would marry up. Like, I wonder.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Yeah, particularly because some of these things are so normalised. And to bring it back to kids, you know, I've got a 3-year-old little girl who splashes about in puddles and likes to build dens in the garden. And the words out of mine and Katie's mouths really regularly are, "You are strong and brave."
Yeah.
And, you know, whether she's riding a scooter or going in the lake or climbing a tree. But she, the other day, like last week, she was going to nursery and she said, "No, Daddy, I don't want to wear that. I want to wear a dress. I want to be beautiful." And we were like, where the fuck did that come from? You know, both of us horrified. And we don't actually know where that's come from.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
No, but we don't want our little girl to grow up thinking that she needs to be beautiful to go to nursery. So of course she can be beautiful.
Yeah. Like how much of that has she picked up from society and from
Yeah.
how much
this
is
is it.
naturally just feminine.
How much is DNA? Because
Yeah,
you know
exactly.
there are elements of young kids. You know the boys do come back with the cuts on their knees, and the
Yeah.
girls like pink, and the boys like blue, as a general census.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and a lot of that, you know, you can't put a pin in how that's happened
Yeah.
in terms of their evolution up to that point. While
Yeah.
there was, and how much was just is part of your DNA.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, and it's an interesting one, that sort of acknowledging the very distinctive differences between man and woman, but also the fact that those differences and that delineation is incredibly blurred.
Yeah.
It's
a
kind of
massive
holding
Venn
both of
diagram.
those things in hand. Yeah.
So let's get on to how you went from swinging around in trees as a kid, you know, making your own harnesses and stuff and playing with nets, to effectively doing that for a job, like, because that's not a normal life path. And I know a lot of parents, probably mine, would be like, stop messing around, you know, in trees and doing that, and get a proper career path, you know.
Yeah.
And I almost had that at a stage when I was like, I just want to play sport. They're like, no, you need to study, because you might not be able to play sport.
Yeah.
which is an important, I don't hold that against them, and they backed me when I eventually got to the point when they realized it could be a job.
Yeah.
But playing sport is quite an obvious career path. Climbing trees isn't.
Unless you meet.
Unless you made this a career for
Yeah, I guess I definitely had that from my mother at one point. When it came to going to university, she was very much like, go to university. This is incredibly important. As I was mentioning earlier, that kind of like that important education and knowledge that has been passed down through our family and is very prevalent. I'm from like a family of geniuses. My sister got like 7 A stars and 2 A's for her GCSEs, and got scholarships to private schools, and then went on to university. And my cousins, everybody's really, really intelligent and really switched on in that academic sense. And I really didn't have the same drive to push myself academically. I didn't enjoy sitting inside and writing and books and studying, and that I found it really difficult. So when it came to going to university, my mum was very sort of adamant that I should do that, and that's something that no one can take away from me. Once you've got a degree, it's an important, significant thing to get. And I did get an unconditional placement to Sussex University to go and do environmental sciences. And I remember sitting in my kitchen, filling out the forms for the housing and all the kind of starting university, and just realizing I cannot do this. I'm going to go and climb trees instead. And just before I left, as I was doing my A-levels, I got the opportunity to work on a conservation and research sort of program called Operation Wallacea, which is kind of a volunteer program where you get to go out into the field and help out with different scientific projects in the rainforest. And the minute I heard about this kind of initiative, it was incredibly expensive, like well out of the region of what we could have possibly afforded. It was like £2,000, but it involved going to the rainforests of Honduras. And I sort of heard about this opportunity, and I was like, that is what I want to do. I'm drawn to rainforests. I'd find myself in geography lessons just staring at pictures of the rainforest canopy, just like totally lost in it. And I had drawn like jungle murals all over my walls as a kid and at home. And I was just drawn to that adventure and exploration from my great uncle, but also just had this like overpowering sense of wanting to be in jungles and rainforests and trees. So when this opportunity came up, I was like, that's what I'm doing. And like my whole family pitched in and helped. My uncle, who's a really eccentric hot air balloon pilot, kind of sold a
Of course he is.
story for another day. Yeah, sold a balloon flight, and then I did sort of bag packing and all the usual stuff. I was working as like a lifeguard, and I was working around the clock doing different jobs. And my mum chipped in like £100 here and there, which was like a huge amount for her. It was all out for me to go on this trip. And yeah, I managed to get on it. And for these 2 weeks, when I got to the rainforests of Honduras, I got to help out with this Israeli bat scientist studying bats in the rainforest canopy. And it was like, this is what I need to do. And I met 2 tree climbers from Canopy Access Limited, who were professional tree climbers working on a research and conservation project. And that's when everything clicked into place for me, because I was like, oh, there's a job here. I can be a professional tree climber. And that's what kickstarted it. And from then I just went on to devote the next 4 years of my life to becoming qualified and getting experience in climbing trees.
And you've gone on to now, we'll jump to the end quickly to then to put some context in this. You've gone on to now run one of the most successful rope access companies in the world, as Matt put, working with people like Will Smith. But at the start, you just were drawn to the rainforest. You didn't even know until you got there that these are job opportunities.
Yeah.
And that the lesson in there, I mean, in terms of like following your gut and following your passion, and then having faith that something will come from that, not having to have the roadmap planned in terms of steps, I think is like a really powerful and inspiring like message.
Totally, yeah. And I think it's so easy to not follow your dreams or to convince yourself that you shouldn't or you can't, but do it. You've only got one life. And I think for me, I had this idea that I was going to explore rainforests and climb trees, and I just stuck to that. And I kind of knew in my bones that if you do something long enough and with enough passion and enthusiasm, it will become something. And I think there's a couple of quotes that really have resonated with me over the years. One of them is, "You are who you want to be." And I think that just made me stop and think, and it made me think, oh, actually, like, you can choose who you want to be, and you can try and be that person, and that in a way kind of makes you that person because you're on that road. And I think that's really important, just to kind of want to do something, and then if you're trying to do it, then you're on that journey, you're doing it. You're kind of already there in a lot of respects. And I think with the passage of time, if you stick at something, it's amazing what can happen.
That's one of the things that I think has bonded us over the years, because we've known each other for a decade now, is that it's this idea, I talk about this quite a lot, of like, why not me?
Yeah.
I think so many people have, people like me don't do things like that. But I think you and I, for whatever reason, both had this, well, why not me thing in our heads.
Yeah.
I can do that.
Yeah, kind of. And also like I just love it. I absolutely love like having a rope in my bag and setting off and going on an adventure. And that has been in my bones since day dot. I forever was like doing adventures with rope. I remember going to a friends of the family's house once, and we were upstairs supposed to be going to bed, and my mum was in the kitchen with their parents, like having a couple of glasses of wine or whatever. And then suddenly they looked out the window and saw the family coming down. I'd climbed out the second story window on a rope, run across their garden, tied it to the climbing frame, was sending all the kids out one by one down this high line into the garden. And I
Waldo's not invited back again.
Yeah, exactly. But that feeling of just having rope and going on adventures just like permeated everything. And I think that's just through a total enjoyment and love of doing it that I've stuck at it. And trees have just been the ultimate kind of avenue for that.
But what is it about that we all have our thing, right? And I think some of it's inherent, but some of it's learned or experience based. What is it about trees, but also kind of adventure and that exploration side of being in nature? You're not just studying it in a laboratory. You need to. I've been there with you. I've seen what your face does. You do love it more than anyone else I know. What is it about traveling in these places, surviving with everything that's in your backpack, relying on no outside influence?
I think with trees especially, there's just the physicality of climbing and moving in the canopy is just fun, and it feels like you're meant to be there. I haven't seen anybody in the top of the tree who's not felt something quite powerful and felt like, ultimately we have as a species evolved from life in the canopy to life on the ground. And so I think there's something psychologically that happens when you're at height, and especially in branches, that kind of triggers something quite ancient in all of us. And I also think for me, the use of ropes to get up into these kind of wild and exposed places is incredibly exciting. You're somewhere that is potentially really dangerous. It's a massive sensory stimulation. It's full on, but with ropes, you can be safe and you can be in these wild places and have a good time, like relax and enjoy yourself. And that is a sense of adventure, kind of getting to places where you almost shouldn't be. and being able to do that safely.
And doing it safely, I mean, I want to touch on a couple of the stories where it has ended up dangerous, because obviously you put themselves, I've heard some crazy stuff from you in the past. But there's also an element here of like upskilling and progression.
Yeah.
And it's like that hunger for learning that you didn't like embody academically like the rest of your family did. But your level of knowledge in ropes, knots, trees, access, creativity around how to get somewhere, that's an ongoing journey, right? So you've had something to work at and improve on, not just like going and putting yourself in these environments. And that must be rewarding as well.
Yeah. No, it is incredibly rewarding. And to kind of briefly give you an overview of that, essentially it was tree climbing that started it all off. Just a love of trees, a love of ropes. And that kind of led into a bit of rock climbing and a bit of rope access. So getting qualified to do industrial rope access. And then that segued into sort of rope rescue, technical rope rescue, confined space rescue, caving, a bit more mountaineering, and eventually big wall climbing and big expedition, big walls with Leo, and a lot more rock climbing. And I found actually the combination of all these different disciplines was something that not many people have embraced and have that kind of that broader spectrum, that kind of overview of. And I think there's a lot of cross-pollination and hybridization between the disciplines that from a technical perspective is sort of elevating and advancing the disciplines massively. So I really count myself lucky that I've had such sort of extensive experience in each one of those disciplines, and I'm able to kind of use techniques that tree climbers would use, but use it in technical rope rescue and use sort of caving systems in confined space rescue, because there's a lot of kind of cross-pollination there, and I like that.
There's a really interesting thing with you as well, which speaks to something that we talk about a lot, which is this, we talk about passion and we talk about purpose, but I think you're like the perfect blend of these worlds, because you're not just, there's nothing wrong with this if this is what someone wants, but you're not a dirtbag climber whose ambition is to live as frugally as possible, climbing as much as they can.
Just for clarity there, dirtbag isn't an insult in the climbing world.
No.
Just, can you just...
Yeah. Dirtbag as in they've dedicated their lives to rock climbing or something like rock climbing, base jumping, whatever it might be. And so they earn as little as they need to spend as much time as possible climbing. You know, that's not you. You have this passion and this enthusiasm, but this profound sense of purpose. And so I've seen you at the absolute extremes of both worlds. You know, I've seen passion party fun Waldo, and I've seen ultra professional keep everybody alive, because if you mess your job up, somebody could die. That's a really unique and special blend. Yeah,
it is. But I also think with sort of professionalism, you know, you do have a feeling of imposter syndrome, I guess, when you're sort of learning and starting out and trying to find your way with things. But essentially always you go, especially with something that's related to safety, you know when something isn't safe, and there is ultimately a hard line there for you to be aware of. And I think for me it's taken a long time to get to a point where I'm very comfortable saying if I don't know something, or if I'm not comfortable with something, or if I don't want something to happen. And I think that for me was really is the kind of pinnacle of professionalism in this career, is being able to be totally relaxed and comfortable with what you do and you don't know, and what you can and you can't do, and knowing that if anyone's employed me to do a job, I can do it very, very well. And if I can't do it, then I can't do it, and I don't have to sort of muddle through it.
And that's a tough place to get to for a lot of men.
It is, yeah.
Things that they don't know.
Yeah.
So you know a huge amount, but the consequences of you not admitting what you don't know are so, you know, extreme. Like Matt said, someone could die.
Yeah.
I suppose you have to be in a position where, for you to be good at your job, you have to admit when you're like, do you know what, actually, I don't think we can do this because I'm not sure how to make that safe.
Yeah, exactly.
Does that spill over into everyday life for you, do you think?
Good question. I think getting to that point has made my job a lot easier because I'm just relaxed with it. And I think definitely there's an element of like confidence and sort of independence that I've gained through my profession and becoming like confidently good at what I do. And then that gives you sort of confidence in the rest of your life. Because I guess like your profession is wrapped up in your identity as well for a lot of us. And like, I'm curious for you, Ed, as well, how you being a rugby player, playing at the level you were playing at, and then having that essentially stripped away from you and having to sort of redefine that relationship and what defines you. And I think that's like, for me, that's something that I find incredibly difficult. Like, who I am is often so closely knitted to what I'm doing and my profession. And I've noticed at points when I don't have a big expedition lined up, or when, if I haven't got a lot of work on the cards, the rest of my life it suffers because I'm like, who am I? Like, what am I doing? My identity is I am a tree climber. I do expeditions. I do these rad adventures. And if that's not happening, it's really sort of a big thing to sort of acknowledge that and take a look at yourself and work on that sort of ability to be you without this thing.
Yeah.
And I guess that's something you've had to do.
Yeah, big
done.
time. I mean, my identity was wrapped up in being a rugby player, but I think I wasn't. So where a lot of people will be listening to this and think, probably some people are thinking, well, Waldo's just really lucky that he's found something from birth, effectively, even probably genetically, having explorers in your family that you can follow. And it is, your identity isn't necessarily the fact you're a rope access professional. Your identity is the fact that you love adventure and exploration and working with risk, whether that's mitigating it or taking risk. And you get to do that for a profession. So I would say that your identity is more interwoven with what you do than mine was being a rugby player. Having said that, I was born in Bath. I was down at the Rec watching Bath play since I was a little kid, and then I got to do that as a job. So obviously my identity was wrapped up in a rugby player, and with that came the image of what I thought being a rugby player meant. The outside influences of you've got to be big, you've got to be tough, you've got to show no weakness, you've got to be fun, you've got to be good on a night out, all of those sorts of things. And I needed to be that to feel good about myself. And at certain points I was that, know. And then obviously when that all got taken away to go to almost a complete opposite, where I couldn't even feed myself or couldn't move and people were having to wipe my ass and all of this sort of stuff, was so hard to take. But then the journey I've been on since then, the people, I realised that the values that I used to look up to aren't necessarily, they have their place, aren't necessarily the values that I now look up to. And the people I've met since, and being outside of that bubble, has allowed me to meet so many people from different walks of life. And, you speak about the female influences in your life. It's quite funny. My whole life up until the point my rugby career ended was being run by men. All my coaches were male, senior players were male, all the players I looked up to were male, and I wanted to embody their character traits. Then I'm in hospital, my mum's caring for me, Lois is the most important person in my life anyway, but also in terms of rehab she was. A lot of my physios, doctors, the nurses who kept me emotionally stable during those times. Now, one of my biggest mentors is my agent Bev. The director of the director, producer, and main person at university who made the film, all female. My life is almost completely run by women, and I think what I look up to now in terms of who I want to be and how I want to conduct myself is very different to what I was looking up to in my sphere of influence as a rugby player. But it's taken time to get to that point to go, actually, I don't need to be Ed the rugby player. I was just Ed who played rugby. And there were some cool elements of that, and I still carry some of those elements with me. Dave Smith put it in a really nice terminology. I didn't retire from rugby. I graduated from rugby. So I'm graduated to become someone else, but I've also taken some of those character traits with me. So now the parts of my, and like I said before, caveated with, there's a lot of parts of me as a person that need improving, and I'm constantly looking to improve, and hopefully through these conversations, that's part of what we're on a journey doing, is finding inspiration from different people to see how we can improve ourselves as men. But also what I look up to is different to what I looked up to in that sphere of influence as a rugby player.
How is it different? Because there's just the whole, you were surrounded by men and now you're surrounded by women, and part of that's a choice, I'm sure, but why is it different now?
Well, I really love people who can be genuinely 100% them, whether that's they love climbing trees or playing PlayStation or collecting Warhammer, or they love chemistry. The people in my life now from different spheres of influence that I find engaging and interesting are the people that I know are fully connected with who they are as a person, and they're not trying to be someone they're not. And a lot of my influences now are female, so they're more in touch with their emotional side a lot of the time. They're more genuine, they're more open, they're more conscientious.
Yeah.
And I want to be like that.
Yeah. I guess as well, there's been like a big spark ignited for you, which is something that definitely resonates with me. In that, I mean, you wrote a book called Lucky, that sense of being lucky, and that, you know, the idea that this could happen to you and you consider yourself lucky, and having that mindset is a beautiful thing and a really, really special thing. And I think, like you just mentioned, how people might look at my career and think lucky, but, you know, there's a huge chunk I've missed out, which was that for, you know, after I did my first sort of like courses with Canopy Access, and which I borrowed a tent for. The zip didn't work. Had a fire starting flint. I was going to make, on my first day doing a Canopy Access course, I was like, I'm going to bring my fire starter flint. This is the start of me learning how to live in the wild. And I was trying to start a fire in a hedge for about 4 hours to heat this can of baked beans and never managed to start it. So I ate a cold can of baked beans on my first day doing a course. But then for the next decade, maybe slightly more than a decade, I didn't have any money. I was volunteering for projects all around the world. And when I was in the UK, I was teaching courses for Canopy Access and working as a tree surgeon. And to get around the country, I had often like 8 bags of ropes. I was sleeping in hedges in my hammock. I was sleeping up trees in graveyards in random city centres. I was getting on buses and trains with like 4 times the amount of bags I could possibly carry and having to get this around places. And then every year I would work and save up enough money to do like what I considered a major expedition, and usually that was like £2,000 to £3,000 would enable me to get a plane ticket and go somewhere really remote and find some remarkable trees that I didn't know much about. And I'd always come back from those trips with about £3,000 credit card bill, and especially in the first handful of years, I think at one point I had like 4 different credit card bills, and my mum was just tearing out her hair. She was like, what are you doing? But I just had in the back of my mind, it's like, I know this is going to lead somewhere. I'm too in love with tree climbing and exploration and adventure to not do this. And I can't wait to have the money I need to do it now.
I mean, there is no way that I was implying that you're lucky to have got to where you've got to.
Yeah, no.
I think the luck element is like, at any one of those points, a lot of people, if they weren't so passionate and driven by what they were doing, would have gone, fuck this. I'm going to get a job. Do you know what I mean? So the luck element is finding something you're so passionate about that it gives you the emotional and psychological, you know, strength to push through and keep following your dream, because a lot of people don't know what their dream is. Like where's the, you know, when someone sat there going, I'm not happy with what I'm doing, I know I'm not passionate about my job or whatever it might be, but I don't actually know what my passion is. You know, that's the harder place to be, and that's where most people are.
And in a way, like, it's risky to work out what your passion is, and to make a step to follow your passion is a risk. If not financial, then there's other risks there. And I think, a few quotes that have really resonated with me is, nothing worth doing is without risk. I think that's important to realize. And also, you might die tomorrow, but you'll probably live until you're about 80, which for me is a really significant idea, because it's that balancing act. It's holding those two things with importance. You know, it's like living your life to the full, making decisions that, you know, that if you can do something that you want to do, try and do it, but also be aware that you've got a long time in this world, so try and navigate that to your best.
Definitely. And that is where I actually consider myself quite lucky, in the sense that I didn't have the ability to hold on to my identity as a rugby player, because that was gone. I was flat on my back. I was forced into a position. I didn't have to deal with the will strength to step away from something into an unknown. I was forced into the unknown. So then I had to work out who I really was, what my values were. And everything I'm doing now was not a conscious decision. It's as a result of following my passions, realizing you could die tomorrow. But I was almost in a lucky position that it might seem the most unlucky place to be in the world. You know, you've broken your neck, you're told you're never going to walk again, all of these sorts of things. But actually, my transition out of sport was a lot easier than a lot of my friends who have had to go, okay, my career is ending, what do I do now?
Totally.
But and this whole idea of luck, you know, we're clearly all on the same page here and thinking about it in a similar way. But, you know, the way that you phrase it in your book and the reason it's called Lucky, I get. But I always struggle when people say, oh, you're so lucky. You know, I rarely call them out on it. But what I think when they say it is, oh, by lucky, what you mean is I've dedicated the last 17 years of my life to one thing and done it all day, every day, without exception.
Yeah.
Like, that's how I made my luck. And I think there's a huge difference between luck and chance. I think this is, for all of our careers, actually, this is perhaps a bit of a controversial point, but I think many people actually do know what changes they want to make to their lives or who they want to be. But the idea of doing it is really intimidating. And often that's because of how much work it'll take or the sacrifice required.
Yeah.
And I think, this is probably similar for you. You can get a bit high horsey with it if you're not careful. Like, I didn't do a ski season like all my mates did. I haven't been on lots of holidays. I can't afford them because I just have dedicated everything. The most expensive thing I own now at 35 years old is a TV.
Yeah.
Everything else is rented. I'm still on the road. I'm not there yet.
Yeah.
And I think we talk about how do you get so successful, this idea of success. Well, actually, someone asked me the other day in an interview, how did you do it? How did you do it? And the closest I could come to a good answer was, I just didn't stop at all the points and times where I probably should have.
Yeah.
Yeah. People want what you've got, but they don't want to do what it's taken to get there. It's easy to look at the end result, but the whole journey's tied into that.
But I think one of the key ingredients for getting to, where we all are is enthusiasm. Like enthusiasm and a smile.
Yeah.
If you're genuinely passionate and enthusiastic about something and you found a way to just unleash that, then you're unstoppable.
Yeah.
When it reminds me of when we were in Alaska, it's like you can teach it. That's one thing I learned. I was not the person I am now when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
But, it was all going wrong for us in Alaska when we were hiking through this forest. We were late. It was dark. Waldo was leading a group of people who didn't really know how to be in that environment, but were all pretty rough and tumble. And when it's raining and we're a little bit lost and Waldo's having to rig these outrageous lines, we just start singing.
It was a barbershop choir going on.
I was leading a barbershop choir. I don't know why we did that.
Yeah, I think humour, isn't it? Like, it's just seeing the funny side and especially when you're doing sort of adventure. I mean, especially with mountaineering and rock climbing, like for me, almost the point of it is that it's pointless. So, like, it's like, well, why are we doing it? Just like we are, and you just end up doing random things in random places with random people, and I think humour is such a key ingredient as well.
So what are some of the gnarliest situations you've ended up in? Sung your way through.
I think. I don't know, just this year, is it this year? Yeah, last year. What night are we in?
I love that there are so many that you just focused on this year.
Yeah. Alaska was last year, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, last year there were a couple of expeditions that were just really challenging in their own way. And I think, funnily enough, I think the hardest part of expeditions, and especially like film expeditions and television expeditions, when you're working with crews that you're not necessarily embedded with, that you're not like really tight with, you've not like planned an expedition to go with specific people. These expeditions are formed because people need people with specific abilities and talents, camera operators, sound recordists, directors, like film producers. They all are sort of lumped together and you're on an expedition. I think for me that the hardest part is social. It's navigating those social dynamics. And I think when you're with a small group, like going to climb something with people that you want to be with, that part of it is a lot easier because everybody gets along and you can kind of just cut through all the like nonsense and just get to it with important issues. And I think when you're with a larger crew, and especially working with film or television, there's that social element. You have to be polite. You recognise someone's got a massive ego and you need to sort of navigate that.
I'm working on it, mate.
Yeah. And I think ego, interestingly, is probably one of the most challenging things to navigate. I mean, we've all got one, but it can be hard work when someone doesn't recognise it and you have to find a way to kind of like get around it or work with it. It takes a lot of effort.
Do you think you have an ego?
Yeah, for sure. I think I have an ego, but I'd like to think I'm I'm a legend. No, I'd like to think I navigate it and use it to my advantage. There are times when I recognise it. There was a time in Dorset with a tree I'm really familiar in, and I went up there for a climb. It's a tree I've actually climbed from the ground with my eyes closed, and it's quite exposed in some parts. And I was up there just jumping around these different branches.
Why?
I woke up one night at like 1 o'clock in the morning and used to get these bouts of sort of just not sleeping very well. And I woke up at about 1 o'clock in the morning and I was like, I can't sleep. I'm going to like envisage, with my eyes closed, I'm going to envisage every part of this climb in this specific tree that was down in this field in Dorset. And I started going through this climb in my head and I got to the top and I was like, I could do that climb with my eyes closed. Like I know it so well now. And it's not an easy climb. There's big reaches and quite exposed, like big limbs. It's very easy to slip off in some places. And then I just had that. I just got the spark in me. So I got out of bed. I got dressed. I got on my bike. I cycled like 2 miles to this valley. I found this tree, stood with my back against the trunk, closed my eyes, walked out, found the first branch and climbed to the very top with my eyes closed. And where was I going with that?
Ego.
Yeah. Ego. And I remember thinking in that tree climbing around, am I being dangerous? Am I being really overly cocky here? And, you know, feeling really slick and smooth and just in balance and just... But I think that's a really healthy part of ego, that kind of like kick you get, that like, you know, feeling badass, feeling good at something and letting that energy help you kind of move and do audacious things that you might not necessarily do without an ego, maybe.
Some people would say the fact that you didn't put it on Instagram means that you probably got less ego than most people who climbed a tree with their eyes closed.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, it's a bigger chat, but there's ego and confidence, isn't there? And we use ego as a negative phrase. I sense you're using it as everyone's got an ego, and that, you know, cheesy thing, but I call it the kind of ego seesaw. You've got ego and imposter syndrome on either side, and your job is to try and balance the two. Otherwise, you're a dickhead or you're not capable of doing anything.
Yeah.
But you know, going back to what Ed said before, I think you are known as like you're one of the A-listers of this world when it comes to keeping people safe in remote and challenging environments. But it must go wrong. It does go wrong. I mean, I have quite literally fallen into a crevasse with you on the end of the rope, which, you know, given the state you were in, perhaps you weren't the right man for the job at that moment. But tell us about some times things have gone wrong and what happened and how you dealt with them.
There's been a lot of instances that have been, you know, very close to the edge, and I think, well, let's go to some examples. I remember once in Namibia, we were getting a film crew down this cave, and it was kind of quite a complicated cave. It wasn't a straight abseil. We had to rig these high lines and like reeved systems so we could draw people out to the middle, lower them down, and then like avoid different obstacles on the way down and drop them down into this like 200-meter deep cave. And we had about 30, just over 30 people, the majority of which couldn't Juma, so they couldn't climb up a rope themselves. And they all had various jobs to do for this film we were making, and they all had to get into the bottom of this cave. So from my perspective, me and 3 of my friends running this system, once we had these 30-something people in the bottom of this cave, it was very committing. None of them could get themselves out of it. It was up to us to haul all of these people out. We had to get all of these people in and out of this cave 3 days in a row. So there's a lot going on, very, very technical job. And on one end of this sort of slot canyon opening, like this, the opening to the cave with this kind of long slot essentially in the earth. And on one end was this killer bee's nest that we had identified, and they hadn't been giving us any problems.
What's a killer bee?
A killer bee is a type of bee that is sort of known for swarming. So they'll sting you and then the whole thing will swarm. And whilst we were kind of wrecking this, we ended up doing the main shoot when this killer bee nest had actually gone. But when we were doing this first kind of foray into it, we had to get access to it, and this nest was there, and we had sort of judged it was far enough away to not pose a threat. It had been scouted, we'd been in and out, and they hadn't bothered us, and it wasn't a particularly active nest, or it didn't seem that way. And then we were hauling one of the film crew out on like the first day, and she was wearing a perfume, like a really strong perfume, and that's like a classic. And so she was hauling out, and suddenly this huge swarm of killer bees like came over and started swarming this woman right in front of me. I'm on the edge of this cliff. She's still about like 10 meters from the top where we can haul her into the side. And that was one of the most scary situations because it's someone that's out of your reach. You've put them in this situation. If this starts going wrong, there's not a lot we can do other than, hurry up. So we sort of sped up the system, started hauling her a little bit quicker. And I had to just speak to her and say, like, hey, it's totally fine. Then they've not started stinging you yet. Just like stay calm. We'll have you out in no time at all. Meanwhile, letting the whole team know without panicking, hey guys, like this is a really serious situation. You need to step on it. And that was just one of those instances where if you panic, the wheels will fall off. If I'd started panicking and directing the team in a panicky way, they would have panicked, mistakes could have been made. The person on the other end of the rope would have definitely panicked because they would have felt the fear in my voice, and situations can get out of hand. So there's been multiple situations where just staying calm and just accepting what you can and can't do and doing the best you possibly can in that situation has proved like pretty critical to things.
Yeah.
I
want to hear the story about when you fell in a crevasse.
Oh, God.
You can tell it.
Well, yeah, I'll tell that one. Well,
Despite, the only thing I'll say is, for a long time, they used to refer to me as the fattest member of every expedition.
Yeah, but that's only because all the rest of them got 9 packs.
I know.
Yeah, that was bad. We'd basically landed in Greenland to do this remote climb, and it was one of the first times I'd seen. Well, it was the first time I'd seen snow deeper than like my shoes. I was doing snow angels and stuff when we got out of the helicopter. I was really
It's like
kind
being
of
there with a child.
Yeah, it was amazing. But it was my first time in a proper alpine environment. And at base camp, we'd filled up some water from this sort of nearby lake on the glacier, and I'd identified this quite scummy stuff in this lake. And had kind of highlighted this to the rest of the team, and you guys were all, oh, we're not in the jungle now, there's nothing up here that will get you ill, we're in an alpine environment. So I ended up drinking it, and everyone did. And then cut to like 10 hours later, we're sort of 8 hours into a really gnarly mission up this really sort of quite scary glacier beneath the Mirror Wall.
We called it the Death Glacier.
We did call it the Death Glacier. There's like active rock fall either side of us, huge crevasses, we're all roped together, and suddenly I needed to go to the toilet. So I stood up thinking I was going to, I needed to throw up. So I stood up thinking I was going to throw up and ended up having to take my trousers down and have a giant poo. Everyone turned around and looked at me.
Because you weren't very well?
I really wasn't very well. My guts just suddenly turned.
I'm on the rope. I'm 5 meters behind him, tied into him. There's crevasses everywhere, so I can't move. And I'm dry retching while he's like...
And then everyone sort of asked if I'm all right. I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. I've probably eaten too much Haribo. So pull my trousers back up. We start walking again. We've got another maybe 500 meters to go. My rope goes tight and I just start projectile vomiting. And it was like that all the way to the cache. And it was the illest I've ever been. And to this day, the illest I've ever been. Like,
do you know what it was?
Yeah, it turned out to be this bacteria that it turns the snow pink. And it's found in those areas. And there was a lot of that around this lake where we'd filled it up. So we think it was that bacteria that I'd ingested.
I remember you turning the snow brown, not pink.
Yeah, well, I turned the snow brown. The bacteria turned it pink. And yeah, to cut a long story short, we basically made the decision that I had to get back to base camp because I was in a pretty bad way. So me and Matt and another Matt, who's like this alpine guy, started walking back down this glacier whilst the others sort of started getting access to the wall. And it was a few hours into that walk, wasn't it? And I was really struggling, trying to put just one foot in front of the other. Diarrhea and vomiting like non-stop, and I was on one knee at the time throwing up, and I had just pooed myself, and I look up and you drop down to your armpits in the snow and go, Waldo, I think I'm about to fall in there's this like puff of snow, and Matt disappears and goes a good 10 meters down into this pretty gnarly crevasse.
This had been happening for ages. Like an ankle would go through, or you go down to your knee or whatever.
Yeah.
And it just kept down. It was just that moment. Both legs went in. I'd put my poles down flat to try and get some friction and it was like a movie.
Yeah.
Like, Waldo, I think I'm about to fall in a woomph.
Yeah, I think just for people who are listening to this who aren't used like with crevasses, so it looks like you're walking across a flat piece of snow, right?
Yeah.
But the crevasses are underneath these snow bridges, so it's not like there's these huge gaping chasms that you've just not been concentrating and walked into. Like where it works is you don't know necessarily where they are. You can try and get a read on it based on the topography, but often you're just hoping that you don't fall through, and that's why everyone's roped up. So it's more like trapdoor effect, right?
Yeah. I mean, you don't have a choice. You can't just navigate across the solid ground because it's covered in snow. but you actually literally have to cross the snow bridges to get from place to place. You know, we've all done it.
Yeah.
And
the colour of that blue, when you do punch through the snow and you see those holes and you manage to backtrack, you look down where your foot's been or your pole's been, and there's this deep, like, electric blue that's kind of bottomless. You know that there's a big gnarly crevasse underneath you.
yeah, I remember. I mean, I can remember so vividly. So, you know, you punch through and you don't have time to think, and you're just hanging there. You're wet because all the wet snow's just fallen on you. I'd gone horizontal because I got a 20-kilo bag on, and you're in a harness. So the position of it means that you're just going to lay flat like you're suspended under a crane. And then I kind of turn my head to look down, and there's like a 20-meter drop below me, and then flowing water that just goes into a hole. So if I'd gone, and we're on skinny, you know, again, we don't need to get technical, but we're on the thinnest ropes possible because Waldo and Leo really like thin ropes. That you can travel on a glacier. So I've got this like tiny little shoelace that's stopping me from plunging into this thing. And the man I'm roped to, I can hear him like vomiting.
And you've got to rely on him to pull you out.
Yeah. But then that was what happened, right? Is I didn't do that. You know, the friction of the rope kept me safe across the snow, and then I had to get myself out, which took a while. But again, it comes back to that humour point and that calm point.
When he's shouting for you and you've pooed yourself and you're throwing up, were you just like, sorry, mate, you're on your own?
No, I think I was shouting instructions to you, and I think I got the camera out and started filming as well.
Well, that's
so I
the
think
point.
I had all bases covered.
I couldn't hear you. That was the thing. So I wasn't shouting for him. I was like, right, I need to get myself out of here. And again, I'll
Is there footage of this?
So the footage, that's where I'm going with this. It's kind of amazing because I climb out and it's deadly, right? If this had gone wrong, but it's partly the shock of it and how fast it all just happens. And you never think you're going to join this club, but I suddenly joined it. So I managed to finally get myself out, which takes time and effort. I'm just sat on the edge, and Waldo has got a camera out, and there's footage of me, and he just goes, move back a bit. So I shuffle a meter, and I just look across at him, and I just go, I just fell in a crevasse. And then he just turns on himself. He's like, I've just pooed myself and thrown up, and Pikey's fallen in a crevasse. That's it. There's no heroics. There's no drama. There's no...
Yeah.
And we're here trying to encourage people to go on adventures.
Yeah. There's something else. Yeah. Another, just as we were talking, another story sprung to mind of when the wheels almost fell off, quite literally. One of the first expeditions I was doing. So I used to get my friends together who are usually farmers from Dorset, and we'd go and do some pretty gnarly expeditions in quite remote places. And once we went to Patagonia to try and find these really ancient trees. And we hired a car, a two-wheel drive Hyundai Accent, and we ended up taking the wrong turning and basically sort of making a beeline through the Valdivian Coastal Reserve on this off-road track that I don't think had been driven in about 80 years. So a lot of it was just sort of a dry riverbed. And yeah, I think with a 4x4 we wouldn't have made it because the vehicle was so heavy, but with the car we had, we managed to sort of haul it up and down these mini cliff faces, like push it up and down. We sort of adapted and managed to do this kind of 5-day journey with this car and get it to the other end of this road. But I remember there was a point on that journey where we didn't have any sort of way of getting in contact with anyone. We didn't have any like emergency beacons or like in-reaches or sat phones or anything like that. We totally ran out of food, totally ran out of water, didn't know how much fuel we needed to get to the other end of this road. And I remember this one night we went to bed, we had plastic bags tied around the bushes to try and collect leaves overnight. We had shared the last bit of water from this tuna can between me and my two friends.
The tuna can?
And we slept on the mud outside this car just thinking that we had totally screwed it. And that was definitely a moment when I felt like we had cocked up.
I think we need the end of that story,
Yeah. Why are you still sat here?
Yeah, so we managed to basically get to the end of this road. It was a really old logging road, like I said, and we got to this giant river that we couldn't cross with the car. So me and my friend swam across this river, and we could see these kind of houses on the coast. And it turns out we'd reached this settlement that is basically only accessed by boat. And they've got a 4x4 in the village, but it's a really, really remote village. They don't have any tourists there. We knocked on this guy's door, and he was called Pedro.
Did they speak Welsh?
No, they didn't speak Welsh. No.
There is a reason for that. I didn't just say that. Okay. But a lot in Patagonia, it's the only other country outside of Wales that speak Welsh.
No way.
Yeah, because a lot of the settlers there were Welsh.
Yeah.
That's another
Good
story.
old colonialism.
Didn't speak Welsh, but yeah, this guy ended up, he opened the door and was really surprised to see us, and we told him we'd had a car on the other side of the river, and he kept saying boat. We were like, no, car. So he came to the river, saw our sort of 2-wheel drive hired car on the other side of this river, and his jaw just hit the ground. And he went and got the entire village. Everyone came to like see this spectacle, and then we ended up like sleeping at his house that night. And he fed us these incredible like sea urchin ceviche. They do they did diving with these air compressors on these dugout canoes and hose pipes, and they could go down like 30 meters breathing air through these hose pipes and collect these like enormous shellfish from the seabed. So we had like the most incredible like seafood dinner, and the next day, using like pulley systems and this 4x4, we managed to like haul our car across this river. It was like estuary, so once the tide went down, we managed to haul the car across, and then the next day dragged our car from that village sea level to like 1,000 meters back onto this logging road that would take us out of the forest. And then we had to take it back to Hertz, which is another story.
I bet they were pleased to see it.
They were very pleased to see it, yeah.
I feel like we'd be remiss as well, seeing as we're on adventures at the moment, to not talk to you a little bit more about the rainforest, considering that's where your passion is.
Yeah.
And whilst we've got someone who's got probably more knowledge than most, your favourite things about being in the rainforest, the most amazing things you've seen. I know this could be an endless conversation. We don't have it, but you know, what are the things that spring to mind? What's most special to you about the rainforest, and like your favourite places you've been?
The rainforest is like the world's finest example of life and ecological diversity. It is plants upon plants upon plants, with insects and animals living in everything. It is the most living place you can possibly go to. And for me, exploring the canopy is what it's all about. Like the minute your feet leave the ground in a rainforest, you're in a realm that is incredibly unexplored. Like in most of the trees in a rainforest, like more people have been on the surface of the moon than up in these trees. They're incredibly underexplored. You get areas in the rainforest that are referred to as canopy gardens. So really dense, thick areas of the canopy. And just to kind of illustrate how these places are formed, plants that are called epiphytes, and these are plants that grow on other plants. So they use plants as kind of a structural base, and they create their own soil. Some people call them air plants because their roots can collect moisture from the air. And you get a myriad of different types of epiphytes, and they grow all over the trees, and they can hold a huge amount of soil. So you get a huge amount of what we call humus, canopy humus. And in that, you have earthworms and other sort of insects and wildlife that you'd associate with the forest floor. And sometimes you have branches of trees that have rotted out, and they can hold 2-3 tons of soil in some instances. And so from up in the canopy, 40 meters up in the canopy, you can have 30-40 meter trees growing from these branches, from these epiphytes. So you can get a world that's sort of typically associated with the forest floor, and you can find these sort of gardens elevated right up in the top of the canopy. Incredibly special places and incredibly unexplored. Like I said, there's like, I've not done a single research and conservation expedition where we've not found a new species in the rainforest canopy. It is teeming with life. And I think for me, getting up into these incredibly dense places of the canopy, some places just have a resonance. They're special and you can feel it. It's like if you walk into a really old forest or an old glade, and you just get that feeling of age and ancientness and peace, tranquility. And a number of times I've kind of popped my head out, and you're bathed in sunlight, and you see butterflies flying around and all these different plants, and you've totally lost sight of the forest floor, and it's just a special place. And for me, there's nothing more exciting than exploring these places in the rainforest.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, you sent me a video not that long ago of you up in a canopy, and there was an orangutan literally right behind you on the branch above, and like it was mind blowing. But you're in a very wild place. You're not in a reserve or in a zoo, you know, because they're not used to humans being in these places. Do you find often the wildlife is a lot tamer in inverted commas?
Yeah, totally. I think when you're in remote wild places and you're a human and you're up trees, I think animals see you very differently. I don't think they have the same response as they would do like a hunter creeping around with a gun on the ground, for example. And I've had that, you know, countless times, animals reacting very differently than how they would if you're on the floor. Once I was working with chimpanzees, and it was the largest group of habituated chimpanzees in the world in a place called Kimbali Forest in Uganda, part of the Jane Goodall research. habituated, but still very wild. And no one.
Sorry, what do you mean by habituated?
Habituated as in they've been studied and observed by humans for like a long, long time. And so they're kind of used to the presence of humans in the forest.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah. So they're used to being watched by humans. And they'd never had anyone sort of climb and rig trees. And the first kind of week I was climbing there, every tree I'd get into, they would go, I mean, the expression ape shit, like screaming, shouting, smacking the branches, charging me down branches, you know, like baring their teeth, really, really aggressive behavior. But over time, they got a bit more used to being in the canopy. And I remember this moment when I climbed up into this tree and hadn't seen this chimpanzee, and I turned around and this character was about like 3 meters away from me. And he was this really gnarly chimp, like covered in scars, about 40 years old. And I remember him like turning around like that and just giving me a nod and turning back again and going to do what he did. And I was like, oh, I think I'm in there. And part of that process involved, I remember this interaction with a chimpanzee just before then, when it looked like he was about to mock charge me. So I just hung upside down and just started chatting to it and sort of interacting, which is not what you're supposed to do with chimps. You're not supposed to look at them. You're not supposed to interact with them. You're supposed to keep that distance. But yeah, I just started playing. Like,
But why did you do that?
I think like I just had a sense of like animals. There's more going on with animals than we give them credit for, and I think like, you know, how it's commonly like how you're supposed to study animals, especially large animals, is to that like lack of interaction, no eye contact, for example. But imagine if someone was following you around, not making eye contact with you, not making any kind of verbal communication. Whenever you looked at them, they were sort of hiding or going, like, it would be creepy. And I just think that's what it's like for these like higher intelligent sort of
That's
animals
what
that
I'm
we follow.
getting
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's, you know, you get a totally different set of behavior if you do interact with these animals, but you have to do it carefully. You know, you have to be respectful and you don't want to sort of impose yourself. But I think it's important to acknowledge that they know you're there and they're looking for some kind of interaction. So I think to shy away from it totally is not the best way to go about things.
So you're hung upside down. How do you talk to a chimp, by the way, just out of interest?
I think I started with, all right, mate.
He's not from around these parts.
Yeah. And I remember sort of trying to act a bit like a monkey. So I like lifted my arms up like that and just kind of wiggled around a bit and then came back on my feet and then swung around between these two branches a couple of times and was kind of like poking my head out from behind this plant, a bit like peekaboo with a kid. And it totally, I felt like the tension dissolve. And I think that animal kind of recognized that I was playing. And I think play is key for animals across all species.
Yeah, we should come on to that because I think, you know, your experiences in the world, I think, are incredibly unique when you look at all of them and add them all together. You know, there's not many people who've done all of the things that you've done collectively. I mean, I remember one of the first videos or photos I ever saw of you. You sent me a load after we did our first podcast together like 6 years ago. And there's a picture of you in full police riot gear in the top of a tree because you're working with vultures or something.
Harpy eagles, yeah.
Harpy eagles.
Yeah.
And like all these experiences, they must have done something to the way that you view the world.
Yeah.
How do you view the world? How do you feel as a part of it?
I think the world has been better than I could have possibly imagined. I've had more adventure and explored more than I could have possibly dreamt of as a kid. And I had pretty big dreams as a kid. So I think the way I see the world is a place to explore. And, you know, for me, exploration is key and an essential part of living. And I think, you know, exploration in all senses of the world, not just physical exploration, going to different countries, but I think psychological and personal exploration as well. And I think that sort of gaining and growing that confidence within yourself to be able to explore in every sense of the world is an integral part of living a full life.
In terms of psychological exploration, feet on the ground in the UK, you've recently got married, right?
I've recently got married.
To Meg, who's an amazing, amazing person. I'd just be interested to know you obviously go on these amazing trips and you spend time in the canopy, and that's where, you know, you've the classic sense of the term exploration and adventure's been.
Yeah.
But what about exploration and adventure back home in your relationships, in realizations you've made more recently?
Yeah.
Just take us there.
It's massive. It's massive. And recently it's become a bigger adventure than the adventures I do, if you know what I mean. I think in the past, like, you know, my entire adult life, I've been doing expeditions, and that's also been a form of escapism. I think, you know, I'm never around. I'm often not at big family events or people's birthdays or weddings because I'm away on an expedition. In the past, with relationships, if they're not going well, I'm going away on an expedition anyway. So I've got a really sort of practical reason to sort of end that relationship, or it's been a really readily available means of me just escaping everything. And I think also, like we were talking about before with identity, it's been, you know, because I've had these years and years and years of back-to-back really gnarly expeditions, I've been totally content in myself and happy that I'm this gnarly explorer adventurer dude and life's going really well, and this is me. And more recently, you know, having a relationship that means so much to me, and that has, you know, I've realized I want to be around more. And also my family, my sister's had kids, I want to see them more. I love hanging out with my mum, with my friends, and I've just kind of realized that community is really important to me, and I want to start investing more time in that. But that's required me to be around a little bit more and to sort of start considering structuring my time and not just taking everything that gets offered to me. But in the last few years, I've been turning down probably about 50% of the jobs that have come my way, and been around a lot more. And that has been really, really difficult. At times, like I remember coming back from an expedition, and about 3 days after I got back, I just hit this massive slump, like a lack of energy. I got a little bit ill at the same time. So I had this kind of physical, like diminishing kind of reserves, and this sense of I didn't have anything else lined up. I'd just done this series of quite big expeditions, and I didn't have anything in the pipeline. And I just remember thinking, like, I'm kind of useless. I don't have a machete or a compass, and like, what am I good for? And, you know, you don't want to, like, you do these trips. When you're on these trips, you're like, wow, this is it. This is everything. This is incredible. But when you get back, there's only so much of blabbering on about these trips that your friends can take, you know, and it's not, you don't really want to go and hang out with your friends and just talk about these trips all the time, because you want to hear about them, and you want to talk about things with substance, and all you've really got to talk about are related to these big adventures and these big expeditions. And sort of, you know, almost every single one of my stories starts with, you know, in this jungle in Africa or in the Arctic when I was and so yeah, I felt very empty and sort of really, really struggled, like, psychologically. And it took me quite a while. Like, it took me kind of a large part of last year to kind of build myself back up again and kind of unpick that that sort of connection I'd formed with my profession and my identity, and sort of really think hard about who I am and who I want to be and how I want to be, and how I'm going to navigate a world where I'm not just doing these back-to-back adventures and running away all the time. And that has probably been one of the most formative periods of my life to date, I'd say. And quite a point to get to professionally. Like, you know, it's easier to go and do these big, gnarly, death-defying expeditions and keep doing that for the rest of your life, and then end up, when I'm finally can't do them anymore, being this kind of lost soul with, like, you know, I could see where that was heading, that way of life, and it wasn't somewhere I wanted to end up. I want to end up with a family and with a community and with friends that are really close to me and who I understand, and I want to, like, keep moving forward with that psychological and inward exploration. And to do that, I think, takes courage in a different way. It takes confronting things that are harder to confront.
Man, it's so big. Like, we talk about this offline a lot, and, you know, I've struggled with my head because of this. I think it's been one of the major points. I always used to say that I'm in love with two things which are completely incompatible, and one is what was just my wife, but is now my family, my kids too. And the other is expeditions, exploration, life on the road. And I sort of made it my job to try and make them compatible, even though they don't naturally fit together. I am not nailing that. I'm trying my best. I'm getting better every day. But that like post-expedition blues, that death of identity, you know, I'm 4 years into the kids thing now, is massive. And I envy, you like, do you want to come to Chamonix or do you want to come do the matter? I can't, sorry. I'm supposed to be right now on El Capitan with Leo and his kids, and I just couldn't make it work with the family.
Same.
Same. We were both supposed to be there together doing this thing, and those days are kind of gone. I don't mean that in a really sad way, but they still happen occasionally. But it isn't. We grow up, we change. But I think what you're alluding to is really important. Is our priorities change too, though?
Yeah.
We're not 21 anymore.
But I think it's about finding a sustainable balance where you can satiate both. When you go from all out doing something to not do it at all is also a dangerous jump.
Yeah.
But it's finding a balance and also being completely respectful about the fact that you do need that in your life, and not denying that part of your psyche or your makeup. And but satiating that in a way that isn't going to be damaging for someone else, and also isn't going to be you're so intricately tied to that when it does eventually end, which it will, with sport or with adventure, like you're going to get to a certain age where you can't necessarily be swinging around in treetops all the time. That you've found a balance to still go on those micro adventures. Like, you don't have to be in canopies, it can be all done in the UK. You can do it through different means. But balance is the key. And you see it in so much, like me stepping into your guys' world. You see the guys or girls, whoever it might be, who have found a balance within their profession. And you also see the ones who haven't, who are chase. And it's the same in sport, and the ones who haven't found that balance yet, you worry. Because if a bad injury or something happens, it's like you end up in this psychological void. So to be able to be in a position where you're still doing the thing you love, but have the consciousness or have the external means or drive through Meg, she triggered this because it wasn't just about you anymore and the things you wanted to do, has got you to a point where you can do both. And then there's a transition there that's a lot easier.
Totally. I think that's incredibly well put. And I think a lot of it comes with age as well. You get older, and I think a big part of it is sort of redefining what age means to you or who you want to be at these different ages. Like, you grow up with this sense of, or I did at least, this kind of idea of how things are going to be when you're 50 or when you're 30 or when you're 20. And then you get to that age and realize, oh, hang on a minute, I'm here. And I think just defining age as it comes is an important process.
Yeah, and accepting who and what you are now and who you were, and dealing with that, the 7 stages of man kind of thing. I mean, this is something I'm going through right now. It's quite big, is this idea of like, who were you? Who did you become? Who are you now? How are you changing? And what do you want to be? And I think there's so much, like, you just have to be so honest with yourself. I'm playing with this idea at the minute that actually, like, vulnerability is honesty. If you said to me, how you doing, mate? And I said, yeah, I'm great, man. I'm lying to you. That's not honest. That's dishonest. Vulnerability is honesty. But I came to the realization this year that I was being a self-indulgent prick because we moved to London for Katie's work. She's a theatre actress, as you guys know, and she's got the same thing as us, a super passion-led career. And without it, she just takes an enormous piece of her identity and puts it in the bin. So I wanted to facilitate that. But I kept talking about this sacrifice I was making. I've sacrificed my expedition life. I've sacrificed this. I don't live in the woods anymore. And I came to this realization that, like, well, I'm not the main character. Like, this isn't all about me. And actually, what I've done there is said, I value my relationship, my children and my wife and my family above my sense of self. Now, these two things need to live in harmony, but it wasn't a sacrifice, it was a choice, because I could have chosen to say I'm not moving to London. I could have made that decision, but I didn't. And actually, I'm learning to be quite proud of the man I've become, who says, because I did not see this growing up. My wife's career is as important as mine. And you guys have got passion-led, strong women in your lives. And if you want families one day, you're probably going to go, I don't mean to do the preachy thing, but like, you're going to go through this.
Yeah.
It's really tough and
Yeah.
it's really rough.
Yeah.
Yeah. But in a way, it's great as well, because you get to know yourself so much better as you get older. You get all these years of experience understanding yourself and opening up other doors and being like, oh, I didn't know that about myself. And so in a way, you do get to these crazy like crossroads, and life does change in ways that you're not necessarily expecting. But alongside that, you've got this sort of fortified idea of who you are and this understanding of who you are that's just growing in strength and broadness.
Based on your understanding of who you are, all the lessons you've learned along your way, your upbringing, whatever it might be, come the day you do have kids, if you have kids, when you have kids, what kind of father do you think you want to be, and what would be the sort of key core values you'd want to instill in your own children?
I want to be a father who's passionate and enthusiastic and encouraging. And I'd like to have a way with the world and encourage a way with the world that's lighthearted and fun. And to care, but not care too much about the things that you can't change. I think I'd like to impart the concept that life has some home truths that you just have to accept. Sometimes it's not fair. And just try and find that focus on the things that you can smile about, even in the face of extreme adversity or like roughness. And I think above all, I'd like to be a good partner to Meg. I think that's like probably one of the biggest things about being a father, is being a good partner to the mother, or the other partner of your children, in however that looks, whether that's co-parenting, whether that's whatever it is for anybody out there. I think it should be a big focus, supporting and being there for that person.
Well, I mean, amazing that you've worked that out before you've got kids, because it took us a bit of it took us longer than it should have to work out that us being pals is quite significant when it comes to raising kids.
Yeah.
But Katie said, I think I've told you this before, but Katie said about Waldo, the character of Waldo was written by a woman. And I was like, what do you mean by that? And I mean, she's definitely alluded to the fact she finds him physically attractive in many ways before. Like, please, could you bring him home in your duffel bag? That kind of thing. But her point is, and I love this, that he's kind of everything. And she's speaking about herself, of course, but she's saying, like, he's kind of everything you want in a man, because he's bold, he's brave, physically, we're getting to take his shirt off at the end. But also this whole idea of, this movement now around, would you rather go to the forest as a woman with a man or a bear? And everybody's saying, I pick the bear. Well, Katie would pick you, if you know what I mean. I'm not offended by any of this, by the way. Like, she loves me.
Sorry, what does that mean? You'd rather go to the
Have we not come across
forest
that?
with a man or a bear?
Yeah, there's a big movement at the
People
minute.
trying to avoid bears in the forest.
No, but this is the point, is there's a movement, I'm seeing it a lot online, and it's a lot in America, but they're saying, we pick the bear. The idea that I'd rather go to the forest and risk spending time with a bear than with a strange man I don't know.
Right.
And it's around women's safety. And
Yeah.
I get the point. But the other side of, Waldo is the strong, brave man we all want, but he's also kind, gentle, sincere, and the least threatening version of an alpha male. And I think that I took quite a lot from that, actually. I think that's something quite like, you can be these two things simultaneously, and I think you nail it. But the question I'm coming to is, I'm sure you're far from perfect. So as a human, as a man, in what ways are you unfinished, and what do you have left to work on?
Oh, firstly, that's high praise. Thank you. And what do I have to work on? I mean, everything. There's always room for improvement, isn't there? And you should always strive for more, and to understand yourself better. I think for me personally, I think when I get frustrated or feel like sort of overpowered by feelings, I don't know how, like dark feelings, I guess, like for example, getting back from an expedition, not having anything lined up, and feeling myself go inward and feel myself go down. I think the process of not letting that get on top of you and to find a way of just touching base with your inner self and like reassuring it that life goes on, you will go on, you're still you, and just getting into your soul and finding ways to do that. And for me, definitely breathing and meditation has become quite a regular thing. So in the morning, spending 20 minutes before anyone else gets up of just sitting and breathing and just trying to bring your thoughts back to your breathing. And it's as simple as that. That does just kind of slow things down and puts you in the now, which can't be understated. Like the importance of not letting your thoughts get carried away with the future or the past, and just being really aware that you're here right now and look around.
Yeah, for sure. Being present. It's an important one, especially today when we're in our heads so much.
Yeah.
Waldo, always absolute pleasure, mate. What's next? What's next on the agenda for what we know?
What's next? I've got this big project that I've been tinkering away at, a long-term research and conservation project in Papua New Guinea that's ideally going to be run and led by a local remote community, and we're trying to get an area of forest protected, and it's complicated and multifaceted. I don't quite know how it's all going to come together, but Matt's given me the eye. And so that's going to be a big focus of me for the next couple of years.
So what's obviously getting an area of forest protected, but what's the purpose behind? So I think you mentioned about bringing your tools to teach the local.
Yeah, exactly. So around the world, we're losing ancient and wild places at an alarming rate. It's a well-known fact. And rainforests especially are being chopped down, often illegally. And the people best placed to protect these places are the people that live there and understand and know that environment better than anyone else. So what I would like to do is bring the tools that are required for conservation. So learning how to climb trees, learning how to implement frontline scientific research, knowing what to do with that research, how to write papers, and ultimately how to put this research in front of world leaders. I want to give these tools to local communities that are living in these wild, remote areas of rainforest. So the whole ethos of this project is to work alongside a local community to equip them with the tools required and give them a voice so that they can lead the charge in protecting the places that mean the most to them.
Mega. What are you doing? I'm just going for a Starbucks.
I'm going to therapy.
Oh, good. Anything else to add, Matthew?
Don't think so.
Thanks,
I
Waldo.
think we're good.
Thanks, guys. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, mate.
Nice one.
Nice.
Great.
Cheers, dude.
Cheers, yeah.